Okay.
Oh, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning, everybody. Well, thanks for joining us on Zoom this morning. It's a pretty dreadful day outside, so it's a good way to spend the day. This morning we're doing a question and answer session with two of the leading lights in Finney7, as you no doubt know. My name is Nick, and I'm going to be chairing the meeting, and my co-host Steve's going to be taking over halfway through. Anyway, before we get started with a few questions for Richard and Steph, can we go through a few housekeeping rules? We would like it if you please all remained on mute unless you're invited to chat. This way we won't be listening to your phone or the football commentary or your dog in the background. We think that you'll probably get more from the meeting if you switch to speaker view. Now, if you go into the top left-hand corner of your screen, if you don't know how to do that, there's an option to toggle between gallery and speaker view. So if you select speaker view, that'll probably give you a better experience. If you want to ask Steph or Richard any questions, then please do so via the chat function at the bottom of the screen and address them to everybody. And then we'll get through as many questions as we possibly can. So let's get going. Can I invite maybe Steph and Richard to tell us something about themselves and something about F7? Take it away, Steph.
It would help if I unmuted, I guess.
Yeah, it would, yeah.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Steph Stephdale. I'm one of the 6 people in Finney7. I'm involved primarily in the business in doing the bits and pieces that are required to get the kits into production. So I spend time in the business doing CAD work, design work, helping with instructions, getting parts out to our suppliers. So I manage our supply chain. And the reason that I'm involved in doing that role within the business is because I am professionally a manufacturing engineering consultant. So this is using the same skill set that I do in my day job. And it gives us apparently some credibility with our suppliers so that we can talk with, in some cases, quite big businesses on a very even footing. So that's a little bit about me and what I do and what I bring to the business. Richard?
Hi, Richard Lambert, good morning. I run the business on a day-to-day basis. I'm the first port of call if somebody phones Finney7, sends us an email, and I'm responsible for dealing with some of the suppliers and getting the ordering of materials and then getting the orders processed, which is actually done by a third of our partners, Mick Roth. And I'm also at the sharp end if anybody has any missing bits and pieces that we try and sort out.
Great. Thanks very much, guys. So does anybody have any questions for the Finney7 guys? If you go to the bottom of your screen and click on chat and address the questions to everybody, and we can ask questions of the two guys that you've got here. Actually, one of the things I was going to ask you both was I've been hearing persistent rumours that you're going to be bringing out a B1 kit. Where are we with that?
We are at the stage where all the design work is done, the etchings are signed off, and we are in the process of productionising the new castings that we need for the kit. Then we have to test build, then we have to write the instructions. So we're well on the way, but we were put back by the pandemic and having to sort out other matters with the supply chain. So we've been thrown back a bit, but it is on the agenda to move on as a top priority. We have 2 top priorities, which are the 94XX and the B1. While nothing is going to happen in the very immediate future, they're both being worked on at the same time.
Brilliant. Well, that sounds quite an exciting prospect to come. And have you managed to get all of the previous Martin Finney kits back onto the market at this time?
Nick,
No.
I think that's a good question. And I can imagine that that's probably one which lots of people would be wanting to write in the comments box, but perhaps a little bit awkward about doing so. It is fair to say that the reintroduction of the Great Western stuff has not been fantastically straightforward. So people will be aware, I'm sure, that we've done some stage reintroductions. So we started with the London South Western stuff. The reason that we did that is because primarily because I'm familiar with it. I'm familiar with the prototype and the kits. So we started with the easy one and got the London South Western locos out first. We had the expertise to do the Duchess and the LNER locos after that. And in the process of bringing those out, we've been cataloguing the Great Western tooling that we have and sorting it. The difficulty that we've had with the Great Western stuff is that Martin was actually really well organised, so he didn't generate, for example, a fresh set of patterns for every kit. So I think at the time we took over the range, for example, across all the Great Western kits, there was something like 5 chimneys, that's all. And what we've had to do is work out where each of those patterns is associated with the kit so that we can then retool. In some cases, we've not had full sets of patterns because the kits are old. Once they were in production, Martin kind of put them into store and left them there. We've got access to everything that he had, including much of the design work.
Can I just stop you there for a second, Steph, because we've got a question that kind of ties in with what you're saying here. It's from David, and he asks, what's the policy on keeping all catalogue items in stock? That's kind of significant.
I think it's, yeah, absolutely. Richard, one for you, I think?
Yeah, we have a policy of keeping at least minimal quantities of every kit in stock. If a kit is out of stock, it is either not yet available and we're working on it, or the better news is we've had a run on it and we've suddenly run out, in which case we immediately reorder. So there is sometimes maybe a 6 to 8 week period which it takes us to restock. But the policy is that every kit in our range is in stock at all times.
Very good. And following on from that, and this is probably a question for Steph, I know he's our kind of resident London and South Western geek. And John May is asking what LSWR engines you're planning on in addition to the L12. Have you got any plans for an X2, for instance?
Right, the L12, John, as you may be aware, was one of the kits which we inherited from Martin, which he had actually not put into production. So he had designed it as a P4 loco for his own layout. It is something that, because I have a personal interest in it, we will do the L12, but it's something which is, at least for the moment, a little bit on the back burner. You'll probably have seen the test etch that that Richard built that we've taken around to shows. There are other LSWR locos in the pipeline. That's was a very fair expectation. I'm not in a position at the moment to say what they are or when they're going to be available, but you can think quite widely, but almost certainly not as widely as an X2. I think that you and the other person who wants one, because I can't see us selling more than 1 or 2, would no doubt welcome it. What I can say though is that if you are modelling an X2, we can supply parts from some or all of our kits. Richard, I believe we can now supply all the lost wax. Can we supply all the white metal as well?
Yes, we can. We're basically saying that if anything goes into our kits, we can supply it separately. The exception to that is etchings, which we have to buy complete sheets for. We will supply etches, but they're very expensive, whereas the white metal, lost wax, brass and nickel silver parts are all available by the part. So if you just want, say, 2 safety valves, you get 2 safety valves. You don't have to buy the entire sprue. That has an advantage for us in that we can retain the rest of that broken into sprue as spares for somebody else who might want one part of it.
Yeah, that's very good. I've got experience of that, and you're very good at it, I have to say.
Thank you.
We've got another question from David, and it's something Steph touched on a little earlier. John May's just responded saying, thank you very much. He's looking forward to any releases, but it's a pity about the X2. And David asks, could you give us an ETA for the unreleased Great Western locos, please?
Well, we've just got the 3232 City Stella. They're now available. We are actually missing 3 sprues of castings for that, which we sent to the caster before lockdown, and he went into lockdown, and with one thing and another, it's taken a very long time to get to the stage where we are very nearly there. Those are final detailing sprues basically for the back head. So we are letting those kits go out because you can get an awful long way with them, and sending on the sprues later when we have them. Those sprues are common to a lot of the Great Western classes. So you could actually build all the loco bar the firebox and then wait to do that. But we are quite close to getting all of them out, bar the Aberdare and the 28XX, for which we're designing new chassis.
Yes, how ironic that it was me where the telephone went in the background. I'm sure the irony is not lost on anybody at all there.
Well, it's made us all a lot more relaxed, Nick. So
yeah.
Long may it continue.
Yeah, just a reminder for those that have joined, please keep yourselves muted until you're invited to do so. And if you want to switch to the speaker view, you'll get a much better experience. And if you've got any questions for Steph or for Richard, please type them into the chat box below and address them to everyone. Right, should we bat on? I think you might have touched on this one already, but it's from John May, and he says, thank you, look forward to these. Pity about the X2. When will the B1 be released? I know Richard touched on that earlier, but perhaps if you could...
Well, we're not really giving a date on that because our energies have been directed in getting the rest of the Great Western castings out. As I said earlier, the etches are done, all the design work's done, and we're productionising the castings. So there's light at the end of the tunnel, but we're not committing to a date yet, although we are working on it.
Okay. Thank you very much. John says thank you. And David asks if you could just expand a little bit about Martin's kit design philosophy and where you fit into that and where you've taken it.
Okay, very happy to do that. So Martin started off with basically getting annoyed with the state of production when he designed the first kits, which I think was the Ara and one of the Great Western 240s.
It was the Aberdare as an etches only kit.
Right. So what we've, thanks for that, Richard. What he's then done is, as he has matured his design process, what we've ended up with is a range which were initially centred on 4mm, primarily in P4, and I can assure you that they go together, certainly the T9 and the M7, which I've built in P4, go together very well in the smaller scale. And what he's then done is he's taken that approach into 7mm, which at the time was also probably quietly revolutionary. What he has focused on in his design work is quality of build. So part of the philosophy that we carry forward is that we focus on not only a high standard of accuracy and a good standard of detail, but also the fact that the models are easy to build in terms of fit. What we sometimes find is that they are complex. They have many parts, some of which are remarkably small, particularly in P4. And what we are doing now and what we are adopting as a philosophy going forward is the emphasis, certainly publicly, is on detail, but you will also recognise that there's very, very strong buildability. What we've been able to do in terms of going forward is we've been able to enhance that with more graphical instructions, which we hope people are finding useful. We've also looked at the ability to improve the buildability further. So you will find that some of the future kits, I'm not sure that it will necessarily apply to all because of design limitations, but some of them, for example, will have self-jigging chassis. We are gradually moving over to a sort of slot and tab construction. And what we are aiming to do is to take the design on in the same sort of flavour, the same sort of strengths. In terms of specifics, the London South Western stuff, which I'm involved with doing the design work for the new London South Western locos, you will recognise the design cues in the new kits that Martin established in the old ones. But hopefully what you'll also notice is that we've made some changes to further improve both the detail and the buildability. Is that a fair assessment, Richard?
I think it is. We are aware, and it's the reason why we bought the range in the first place and got involved, of the high quality of the kits and the way they look. So the last thing we can afford to do or want to do is actually drop that standard. So we feel that we have to take it on to make them better still in some respect, whether it's a buildability or detail. So we are very conscious of the heritage of what we have, and that's driving us to move forward and make things better. By nature, all the partners in Finney7 are active and competent modelers and want the very best of the models we build. So that is also a driver for what we do.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So we'll change tack very slightly here. We've got a question from David Thomas, and he asks, in terms of building, how would you attach the thin, tender etchers for a Great Western Railway kit without getting any ripples?
Right, I'll pitch in on that one. David, the trick with these is not to aim to attach the whole surface. If you can form the wrapper accurately.
I think he's asking about etched tender sides, Steph.
Yeah.
Sorry, did I? Yeah.
Yeah. So if you can form the wrapper, the U-shaped wrapper accurately enough, then just tacking it on the sides in perhaps half a dozen places. The only place where you need a seam is along the front edge so that you can dress it back, which I think is right for the Great Western tenders. Maybe you can come back to me on that. What then happens is as you complete the assembly, so you add, for example, when you then add the tender flares and tender top on, as you do so, the solder will weep into the area and will help fix the wrapper on, but the trick is not to apply either too much heat or solder. Actually, Nick, is that fair? Because you're a, I don't know that you've built any of these Great Western kits, but you're a pro builder. So is that a fair?
I think that's a very fair assessment. If I were doing something like this, I would just tack it anyway here and there. Once you start trying to put too much heat into a thin etch, and it inevitably will start to ripple, and it's very, very difficult, you know, to get the rippling out once it's begun. So just tacking it here and there is the secret. Richard, you're also
as little solder as possible, the lowest temperature possible, and make the joint as quick as possible rather than going over it or putting prolonged heat on it.
Should we move on then, chaps? Someone asked, John May asks, that a while ago you said there was a possibility of London and South Western Railway wagons, and he wonders where we are with those. Is there any prospect of them coming along at some point? Okay,
so in terms of a little bit of history around that question, Martin did again in P4, a couple of wagon kits for London South Western vans. Very good, very well reviewed. I haven't built them. I don't have experience of them. I don't think we have the tooling for them. So if we were to do London South Western wagons, they would be from new, which means that they join the back of a very lengthy queue, if I'm honest. The reason for the question, I am sure, is because of the demise of the OBS range. And obviously, if the OBS range was still available, I think I would be pointing people in that direction. London South Western and Southern Railway rolling stock remains on my radar, but it is, if it happens at all, it's a long way off. But a fair question.
Yeah. So David comes back and says, back to the soldering of the tender sides. He says, fine, thanks. I'll stop trying to fix the overlay to the cage. But actually, I think it's okay to tack it to the cage here and there if you feel the need.
I think that's the important thing. It's a quick tack rather than any dwelling of the iron on the inside of the cage.
Yeah, definitely not on the outside.
I would agree with that. Trying to sweat the whole two pieces together will inevitably lead to disaster, I think, won't it? Okay. So John May again comes in and says, does this include coaches, which I presume is a reference to London and South Western Railway coaches. He says he knows that Martin did quite a lot of CAD for various London and South Western coaches and wonders if you've got any plans for those.
The London South Western coaches which Martin did artwork for were not produced by him. So the other thing to bear in mind in the context of Martin's CAD work and the London South Western stuff in general is that a lot of it was done either formally or informally with Southwark Bridge. So we certainly don't have access to the carriages in any scale. I also conceptually have a problem with panel coaches in 7mm being done etched. If I manage to solve the problem that's associated with that, then we might do carriages. But again, please don't expect it, and certainly please don't expect it for a year or 5 or 10, just to put that into some context. I'm conscious of how many introduction slots we can run in a year, and I'm conscious that I know what is coming and roughly when, both from myself and from the other designers in the team, which is the challenging thing for us, is that we've got multiple designers and only a limited number of production slots in a year.
Great, thanks very much for that, Steph. Can I just remind everybody, if they want to ask Richard or Steph any questions, please do so via the chat function at the bottom of the screen, and address your questions to everyone, please. Right, next question's from Andy Biggs, and it's about heavy-duty crank pins. He asks, how do your heavy-duty crank pins vary from the, I assume, bolts provided with Slater's wheels?
Okay, I can take that one. They are actually those that used to be manufactured by Derek Mundy. So they are basically a tapped brass tube that you screw in from the back through Slater's wheels, and then you screw in the caps to keep the valve gear and coupling rods, etc. on. There is a flange about 2/3 of the way down the shaft, which locks it in place at the front of the Slater's wheel. So they are quite bulky. In my opinion, the flange is a little bit too deep, and we're going to try and get those manufactured rather more thinly than they are at the moment. My own personal view is that there's nothing wrong with using the Slater's bolts, because if those shear, you have a far greater problem than bent bolts holding the valve gear on. So I only use them sometimes on the leading axle when I need to have something very flush to avoid hitting the crank, hitting the back of the slide bars or crossheads, but they are essentially the Derek Mundy product.
I'd agree with that. I think sometimes the biggest problem actually with Slater's wheels is maintaining the centre of the hole in the wheel for the crank pin. I notice on some Slater's wheels the crank pin does tend not to go, if you use the hole as it's moulded, the crank pin's not perpendicular to the surface of the wheel. You know, you have to kind of tweak them to get them perpendicular again.
I must admit, I always tap them before putting any screws through.
Yeah,
Make sure the cans are sunk at the back.
It could just be the way I do it. Anyway, can we move on? We have another question from David, who asks about tricky elements. He asks, how do you simplify those tricky build elements such as rolling boilers and tender corners / flares?
Okay, I'll answer the question in principle. David, can you drop into the text whether you've built one of Martin's kits, and if so, which one or which ones? I'd be interested to know where specifically that question comes from. If you haven't built one of Martin's kits, then in order to answer the two specific questions that you've got, so with Martin's kits, the boilers are rolled into a tube, and they have a closure plate at the bottom. So when you have finished forming the boiler, you end up with a continual tube. Now, the thing that Martin has done, which is quite clever, is that after you form the tube, you then insert a circular spacer, typically in each end. In more complex locos, there might be a framework over which the parts form. I think Richard the Rover has got a structure over which the wrappers form for the firebox, I think.
Yes, the firebox is separate, and there's actually a very strong structure over which the firebox is bent and soldered.
Okay, so what those features allow for is that providing that you've got some form of curve in the boiler, then the formers will pull it back to straight and will enable an accurate build to take place. I notice Nick's nodding, because of course Nick's done a couple of stunning examples of our T9, so you'll be familiar with that, Nick. In terms of the tenders, the London South Western tenders, the flare comes in two continuous pieces. So it has the corner flare is part of the etch. So providing you form it accurately, it will sit in a formed rebate around the top of the tender. Again, it means that the accuracy is there, both in terms of the angle of the flare and also the shape of the corner. Again, it requires a little care, but those particular parts are in brass, so you do have the opportunity to have a couple of cracks at it. I think those are a couple of examples of where Martin has thought this through. It's a little bit different in other kits, to be very honest with you. So I'm conscious that the Great Western tenders have curved flare rather than an angled one. And I have to admit that off the top of my head, I'm not certain about how the corner flares formed, but it's a good question.
Yeah, he does mention here that it's the Bulldog kit that he's talking about specifically. Okay,
so the Bulldog, the challenge which most people have with any of the Great Western kits actually is usually with forming the Belpaire firebox. I can assure you that the parts fit accurately the way that Martin designed them, and I've reviewed Martin's design work on a couple of the Great Western kits. They do fit accurately. I have built a Belpaire firebox from our 4700 kit, which is the one that you will find in most of our current instructions. Martin designed that around two spacers. So again, providing that you can follow the instructions carefully, these are the new ones, so that you've got spacers set up. You use the spacers to provide you a guide on how to form the wrapper. and then you can fit the wrapper to the spacers as a unit. So you're not dealing with items in, having to find multiple hands to stick lots of bits together. Again, you're in a situation where you've got accurate assembly, and providing that you make that Belpaire firebox up correctly, it does fit the kit.
If I can come in there, there's also invariably some little half-etched marks that indicate the centre, both on the underside of the part you're forming and on the former itself, and it's crucial those are lined up properly.
That's very good. I'm going to hand over to Steve, who's going to be taking over the hosting of the rest of your Q&A session. So take it away, Steve.
Okay, thanks. Morning, everyone. Just a quick reminder regarding chat. If you use the chat function, which is located at the bottom of the screen, for questions, and the question that's come from David is one regarding my only suggestion were to add cast corners to the Great Western tender kits, and he said I agree that the parts do fit well.
I think it's a fair observation. We're looking at a number of incremental updates, we assess all of the kits before they go back into production. The curved corner flares are a little bit of a bone of contention. I don't like them, and I know that amongst the team there are other people who do like them and other people who don't like them. If we could work out, if we can establish a way of casting them cleanly in a way which does not require other modifications to the kit, it is something that we might look at. Please don't underestimate the difficulty of casting a thin web of metal.
Yeah, I was going to say, these flares are inevitably half-etched, so we are talking about a very, very thin casting that I think would be quite difficult from a production point of view to reliably reproduce.
Yeah.
Does that answer your question then, David? I've got no further questions at the moment, guys. So if you want to talk about anything else, or anyone's got anything that they'd like to talk about. Well, actually, a question's just come up from David, which says, have you had any thoughts on 3D printing?
Lots.
Yeah. Shall I? I'll kick off on that one. So,
should we just start by saying it's a non-starter to put 3D printed parts in a kit?
Absolutely.
That's the starting point, and then I'll let Steph take over.
Okay. So, despite what the world at large may have you believe, 3D printing is no universal palliative. It's not. Certainly, at the moment, not in a situation where we can get either the cost or the quality on a production basis. We can get very, very high quality, but that's on machines which have bespoke setup. We can get very, very, we can get potentially quite low cost, but it will be rubbish in terms of quality, because they will be on machines which are maximised for throughput. It is something which we watch on a regular basis. One of the reasons is because we would like actually to be able to put, for functional reasons, some plastic parts in the kits. And the easiest way of doing that at the moment would be through 3D printing. We use it a little bit for prototyping. For myself, it's a fairly routine part of day-to-day business. It's, for us, it's just another technology. We will continue to produce pattern, tooling, artwork by traditional means, and the same way as we will adopt 3D printing going forward. It's probably quite a pointed question, because some of you guys will be aware that Simon and I did some work with Nick, which is what got 3D printed inside motion into a couple of T9s that Nick built. We are some way further on in terms of technology and approach than what was used there. But as Richard says, it's not something which you're likely to see in our kits just at the moment. Although so saying, of course, we've got 3D printed brake blocks in a couple of the kits. So again, that's an example of where we've done it for functional reasons.
Okay, thanks for that, Steph. Just going back to the question regarding the Great Western Tender kits from David Thomas, he just said, I currently remove the fingers and fit just like the real thing, part thinning it by filing. So I think we all have different methods for the flares. The next question is from Andy Biggs, and he says, I'm interested in the Great Western Railway 5100. Any comments or advice, please?
One for you, Auntie Wainwright.
It's a good kit. It's like all kits. It takes time to put together, but if you take your time and you follow the instructions, you will end up with a really, really nice kit. I think it's the best representation of 5161XX on the market, and you produce a really good kit from it, a really good model from it. One of our partners is some way through producing one, and there are pictures on the Western Thunder forum about it. So if you want to have a little look, you might be able to find that. Or if you email me after the presentation, then I'll try and find it for you so that you can have a look at it. But it's a good representation of the prototype.
Okay, thank you. Just from Sven Lovstrom, beautiful kits. For me, the A3 is the one to get one day, and it's a dream. Yeah, yeah, it is. Many years ago, before you guys, I do recall somebody building one, a club member building one, and it was, yeah. So I'd agree with him on that one. Next from Dave. Just
for a second, that's somebody was asking earlier on. I just want to draw a couple of dots together, if I may. Somebody was asking earlier on about easy to build features. So the A3 actually is a really good example of where there are features in the kit which are enormously helpful to build. So for example, there is you form the edge of the valance, which you'll know is quite curvy in shape. That forms in a cradle from underneath, which has two purposes. One of which is it allows the running plate, which is also curved and therefore complex to form, a nice stable base on which you can build. The other thing is it's actually at the right height. So after you've established that, you can then go on and build the tender if you want to, and you will know that the running plate height will match as you build the loco. The A3 also has an internal structure to both the firebox sections and also to the boiler sections. So your taper angle is guaranteed, your slope and the very complex, I mean deceptively not simple shape of the firebox is guaranteed. And so is the fit of the three parts and to the cab. In addition, because the way the loco goes together, it's entirely possible to assemble it with the boiler separate, so that you can build the loco up complete with the boiler separate, and therefore your painting is also very much easier than it might be with other kits. Sorry, I'll shut up now.
No, please, Steph, that's what it's all about. So next question is from David, and he's saying, any thoughts on alternatives to Slater's wheels?
Richard?
Not really is the answer to that. Slaters have said they will work with us on new developments to make the wheels better, by which I mean they'll be moulded from both sides. there will be an increase in cost for that, but you will get a better wheel. Other than that, you're looking at really high-end, high-end works at about £100 an axle from the very few people who do them. Most people don't want to go to that level of cost. Most people don't see a real problem with Slater's wheels, assuming you're putting it on a working loco, normal 32mm track and all the rest of it. Personally, I use them all the time. I think they're very user-friendly in that they can be unscrewed and wiggled past brake gear, which wheels like Alan Harris can't be. So we're not really considering either doing ourselves or trying to source any alternative wheel sets.
There are a couple of, just to build on what Richard said, all of which I think is fair, there are a couple of refinements that you can do to Slater's wheels that can make them look and perform a little better. There are plenty of tutorials on, for example, Guild website, Guild resources, so that you do things like sand the backs down to make sure that you get rid of the moulding pips on the back of the wheel. Richard will know as well that I have a very nefarious method of taking 30 pound out of the back of the plastic part of the wheel. One of the things that Slaters have done, if you actually have a chance to look at their wheels, the front shapes tend to be quite accurate. What happens is that the mould draft and the depth of the wheel then takes over, and you're then distracted by the thickness of the spoke. So if you can remove thickness from the back, you actually gain appearance and fidelity, and it can be quite dramatic, the effect. The other thing that I do from a functional perspective, which we nearly touched on earlier, is that I tend to use 10BA steel crank pins rather than the 12BA supply. And that just gives me something which I know means that the crank pins will always pull up perpendicular to the wheel front. And I think once you've got those two things as part of your repertoire, using Slater's wheels becomes actually very straightforward and gives you very, very great fidelity. Certainly models I've built have been mistaken for being scale 7, and it's not down to the fineness of the wheel tread, it's down to the fact that the wheel centres are look better than a stock Slater's wheel.
I can tell you from experience as well, not that I'm trying to promote David White's range here or anything, but I know from talking to him that it's also his plan to start moulding the wheels on the front and the back. He started doing that for some of the scale 7 wheels that he puts out there on the market now. And in the past, all the wheels have always been moulded with a flat mould at the back, and they're going to start doing full scale mouldings, with a front and a rear former, so the wheels will be full profile. So that's something to look forward to, I think.
Steph, it's a question just to go back to, you were talking about taking an amount off the back of the wheel. How would you actually do that?
I think, okay, the way that I have done it is I use nothing more exotic than plasticard to support the wheel on the rim, so that any difference between the rim height and the boss height is taken up with plasticard, so that you've got it on a half-fat surface. I then use a router. It's very, very hairy. I then use a router which I set to the back of the wheel. I then take the wheel away, put a 30 thou piece of plasticard underneath and grind at it until I hit metal. The trick is to make sure that you don't hit fingers beforehand. Of course, if you've got a lathe, this is an absolute cinch. One of the things that I'm quite strong on in terms of the work that I do is I'm trying to come up with techniques that will work for the majority of people without fully equipped workshops. And I recognise that everybody's got a lathe. If you have, take 30 thou out of the plastic on the back of the wheel, you will notice an immediate improvement in the appearance of the wheel.
Thank you for that. comment from Richard Spores, and he just says that what Steph said about the A3 applies to the V2. I'm presuming that's correct.
Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
From Michael Schumacher, I tried to use your Mark II horn blocks with Slater's isolated bearings, but noticed that the bearings have only a flange that allows the bearing to move outwards. Any comments, please?
Okay, absolutely fine. All that we do is, it's worth noting, we sometimes get this question, so I think it's a good one. The hornbox ultimately are therefore held in place by the back of the wheel. This is therefore you can set the chassis up in the same way that you normally would in terms of spacing washers for back-to-back. So all that will happen is that when the chassis is running normally is that any side plate, rather than being between the back of the wheel and the horn block, will be between the horn block and the frame. So as long as you allow for that flange on the front of the bearing, mechanically, they will work very well. Your observation is entirely correct. I think Slater's solution is a very pragmatic solution to the problem.
Thank you. I've no other questions at the moment, Steph. Richard?
Okay.
Richard, can you remind me what the kits are that are the next ones out?
The ones that we've just got out are the 3232, City, Stella, Dean Goods as well.
Okay.
I think we might also be very, very close to getting the pannier out again, but I need to speak to Mick and find out what parts we've got for that.
Okay. Okay. That would be good. It'd be nice to see the pannier back out again.
Yes.
I'm trying to think how many. I noticed we've had conversations about this, jigs used in construction. I'm trying to think between us if we can work out what other ones have got that kind of jig construction. So we know the Rover has.
The LSWR locos are all built on a cradle, if that's what you meant.
Yeah.
And that makes life a lot easier. I must admit, I can't remember of the others I've built. Yeah, A3 V2. I think the Duchess as well. Certainly, Martin's later locos all have the cradle, and that does make life a lot easier.
Yeah, there's some. I think that the Adams Radial has got again some easier to build features in it from memory, so that the front of the frames effectively snap together.
Yes.
So there are several of the kits, if not all of. Well, I would argue that all of them have easy build feature in that the parts fit together.
Can I perhaps ask you a question, Steph, as well? I remember some while ago building a Bullied Light Pacific, and it was very good, but I did have problems. Oh yes, one of those. I did have problems covering up the sandbox filler holes that were subsequently plated over on the later variant of the Light Pacific. Do you have any advice perhaps on how to fill those holes, without leaving any witness marks on the moulding?
Okay, so the first thing is the current generation of castings have Richard has worked very hard on the surface finish of the tooling. So you'll find that the newer, the Finney7 Bullied Light Pacific mouldings, actually the other locos that have got resin mouldings are also have a much improved finish over historically. The other thing is, if I am honest with you, Nick, I would suggest that those are done using Milliput wet rather than relying on sanding. There is always a challenge, particularly in the kits of the sort that we produce, is where we go, this is what you should do, and whether in the instructions we provide detail on how you can do it. So, for example, we wouldn't put instructions in the kits about how to do soldering or how to mix two-part epoxy, both of which are questions that we've had at the stand over the years. So we've got to assume that there is some knowledge that people have, and one of those is going to be around those sorts of assembly techniques. But in terms of the Bullied Light Pacific, if I was doing one of those now, I would do it with Millifoot. I would use it wet. And the way that I would make sure that I got that shape right is that I would match something like a piece of plastic card to the profile on the edge of the casing. And then you can splodge your Millifoot in, wet your piece of plastic card, and just strike it over the surface, and it will end up smooth.
And then I would also say that you still end up with witness marks that way, with some sort of slight shrinkage or what have you. But then we'd use some Mr. Surfacer. So give it a spray coat to see what you can see, and then use Mr. Surfacer, which is a suspension of paint in the liquid, basically. Brush that on over the witness marks, let it dry, and then really, really carefully sand that down with maybe even 1200, and repeat until you simply can't see it.
Thanks, that's good advice. I'll do that next time. Thank you.
A question, guys, from Peter Lydiard. He's asking, when do you expect the Bulldogs to be released? I'm presuming he's talking about kits.
And I'm assuming he means the Great Western ones, not the London South Western one.
Yes, I would have thought so. Well, the answer is you must be very close to that, because the latest patterns we've done are suitable for the Bulldog, aren't they?
Yes.
So we've got samples of those and they're fine. So as soon as we get those into production, we're talking 6 to 8 weeks once we've got the orders for the etches in. So you could order one now, and we would then sort of put that into production and come back to you when it's available.
That was easy. I wonder if the etches are back to 6 to 8 weeks.
They have been.
Good. Okay.
Although who knows what's going to happen if there is a lockdown in the next month or so. Because what we find is that the suppliers then stop working. So we're immediately stuffed in terms of lead times for getting stuff back into production.
Anything more, Steve?
No, nothing at the moment. Oh, sorry, hang on. Yes, my apologies. Any plans to upgrade the website? More pics especially. That's from David.
Funnily enough, we were talking about this over the last couple of days. The answer is yes. People very kindly send me some very good pictures of the models they do. And it's long been an intention to either have a gallery or put specific pictures of the locomotives on the page relating to the locomotive. So we do want to do that, and that might happen within the next couple of months, time permitting. But we do intend to upgrade the website, yes.
Okay, thank you for that. Peter Lydiard has said thanks for that. Yes, he did mean the Great Western Bulldog.
Sorry, I was pulling your leg.
Anybody who does want to order something, just email me via the normal channels or phone me according to the number on the website.
Okay.
That was your 11:55 plug. You only get one more now, Richard.
There's a question from David Thomas. Added on to David's question, the instructions often come back page not found. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, it does. It's unfortunate because of the way that the site, again, Richard and I have been talking about it, unfortunate because of the way the site is hosted. We lose links periodically, and we seem to be continually fighting a battle. So it's one of the things that we acknowledge that we can do more with the website. Our defence is and always has been that we are a company of toy train people not website engineers. And I, at least, would much rather be spending time sitting in front of a computer designing stuff or sitting in the workshop building stuff than I would working on a website. And I think that's probably true for all 6 of us, if I'm honest. So observed, taken, and we will continue to try and keep on top of it.
Yeah, thank you. Moving on, there's David Schumacher asked, I would like to see pictures of the bits and pieces. I'm presuming the parts that are sold separately.
Yeah, we have a display board that we use at shows, which is great because people can look, point, and we can then take stuff out of packets for them. It's a good observation. I hadn't realised that actually, but as soon as you said it, I realised that actually we don't have material on the site other than a list of what those parts are. I'll take that away. I'll have a think about how we can do something like that.
The problem with that is a problem of our time, in that we would love to have a fully interactive e-commerce site which goes through everything in all our kits and enables us to just sell everything without real involvement on our part. That takes an enormous amount of time to set up, will require somebody to photograph absolutely everything that goes everywhere. And our efforts have been directed to getting the rest of the Great Western kits out and generating a couple of new kits. So that's a long-term aim. We recognise it as a weakness, but it's been on the back burner simply because it's taken us much longer than we thought to get the Great Western part of the range out.
Thank you. Nothing else at the moment, guys, in relation to questions.
Can I come in with a question? Richard, how are we doing with the castings that we're missing from Telford last year?
We're getting very close. There were 3 sprues, principally 3 sprues that were missing from the Great Western kits. We spent a lot of time chasing these, but unfortunately lost 6 months due to the shutdown and COVID problems earlier. We have had samples of those castings, and we still have reservations, in particular about one of them that we're waiting for another run on. So we're putting a lot of time and effort into it, but we can't send them out yet. So all I can really do is ask for your patience and assure you that we really have not forgotten it. We're keeping a list of all the customers who require the extra bits, and we'll send them out just as soon as we can. But we're not going to release them unless we are satisfied that they meet the quality tests that we expect of the kits, and we know that you expect of them as well. And the ones we've had to date, we couldn't guarantee that. So we are putting a lot of time into it, but we are just not there yet.
Okay, thanks.
If there are no more questions, the session is coming to an end, guys. Thank you for all of the participants. Unless Steph and Richard have anything further to contribute or wish to make...
Really, I hope we've answered all the questions. Not necessarily what you wanted to hear, but we've given you the best answers we can. Yeah,
thanks. It's been an interesting selection of questions. There's some real corkers in there. I hope we get the same this afternoon. It's really good.
Yeah, I've enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thanks very much. I suppose we'll reconvene at 2 o'clock, fellas.